fine. I'll share my screen. Okay, so today we are going to cover few basic properties of CSS, and so there is not much in D3JS if you consider CSS, but there is a lot in JavaScript. So we have already, so what we have learned basically yesterday, we learned about like how the event work in JavaScript, and we also learned about how we pass a function to another function, right? So we can understand the D3JS code where we most likely follow the same pattern. And also we learn about the chaining of methods, and also like how to access properties or attributes of an object like document, then body, and then nested nodes. And we have also seen different set of events. So I think those were the information was enough for you. And even also we learn about concepts like prototype and also scope. So that is enough to apply what is required for D3JS. And today we are going to cover a few other topics in CSS. So there is not much. If you see, I have these many properties. I think this is mostly likely you use. The most important one is SVG. So we'll cover SVG in detail. We'll see like few example of SVG. So let's start with basic like position. Okay, how many of you know position property of CSS? Anybody volunteer like for? Yeah.
Just applying the position, right? I mean, what where it should be placed and what should be the hiding or what kind of
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's say if I have now, if you see, I have an example. So I have a div, right? So this is like a parent div, and I have another div which is a child div which is nested inside parent, and I've given a class called element, right? So basically if you see, my CSS is for the parent. If you see, for a parent I have a border, right? I have given a color and it's a solid. Then I've given a color to the background, and I've given padding to 20 pixel, so there is a padding, right? So similarly for an element, so this is like basic properties like border. So border is like how much border you have given. So if you see here, this is the border, and then we have given a format of dotted. You can give solid also, like the one you have given for the parent, and then we have given a color. Similarly we have given a background color to this child, and then we have padding which is 20 pixel, right? And the position I've given relative, and then with the margin top. Now let's understand this position relative. This is something is very important. So what position does, right? So like if you're applying a position relative on a child element, it will align or it will placed according to the parent, right? So if you see here, we have a child element, here we have a parent. So in this case, if you have given a class, like if you have given a CSS called position relative to the child element, then this will get aligned based on the parent. So you can see like based on the parent it get aligned, right? And why everything is centered? Because we have given a display flask and justify content center, right? So this is given this is a standard way to align everything on center, but we don't need to get into this. What is much important is position. So whenever you see position CSS on any HTML element and the value is given as a relative, that means it will align relatively to the parent element, right? So if we have given, let's say there is no parent element here, right? If there is no parent element, then it is not aligned with the parent, and it is aligned with the document, which is like body of this HTML document, right? So you have body, so this is the parent for this child element. So this is the important thing to know, what is parent, what is relative. The similar we have like absolute. Let's say we define absolute. So if you define absolute, then what happen? So now it is, so in absolute, your element is aligned according to the body, right, not the parent. So with a name you can understand it, it's a position absolute. But if you give position relative to the parent, then you can see, then what happened, it align based on the parent, right? So just to understand the difference between relative and absolute on a child element, when you give relative to a child, it is aligned relatively to the parent, and when you give absolute, it doesn't follow the parent, it follow the document body, right? So if you give say 10 pixel, so and one more thing, like if you make it relative, if you make this element absolute and but the parent is relative, then in that case it will follow the parent. So if you say position relative, you can see now it's follow the parent. But if I just do like this absolute, right, and you can say top is 0, right, you can see it is now when the child is absolute, it doesn't follow the parent, it follow the body, because body we are saying top 0, so top 0 not with respect to the parent, it is following with respect to the body. You can also see if you say let's say you can give left equals to value 0, then it will go to the left, right? And if you say right 0, then you can see it goes here till here, because right is 0. So now you can see when you give position absolute, it is not following the parent, it is following the body. Similarly, if you have position fixed, right, so absolute and position fixed works same way. But let's say if you give something like this and you remove this top to 0, so you can see it goes to the bottom, right? So it becomes a footer. So when you give position fixed, right, so it get fixed. So what is the difference between absolute and child? So absolute will get placed, right, it actually the position is altered by the scroll. So but if you say fixed, like if you have some more content, then you can have a scrolling on this page. But if it is fixed, right, then this will not change. But in absolute, if you have more content, then your this element, the element will get scrolled with the DOM, with respect to DOM. So you use fix to fix the element. You can fix to anywhere, you can fix to the bottom, you can fix to the top, you can fix to the right, you can do anything. And let's say now let's see what happened. So you can see nothing happens even though your position is fixed. So that's the difference between absolute. If it is absolute, then it will not follow the body, it will follow the parent. If the parent is position is if the parent position is relative. So you can see fix is doesn't follow body or doesn't follow like anything, it's follow the very standard rule, right? So there is no scrolling happen. If you have more content, your position is get fixed all the time. But when you say absolute to any element, it can alter with respect to the parent. If the parent has given a relative position, then it can move according to the parent. If there is no position relative, then it doesn't follow, it act like a similar, it act like a your fixed element, right? So your absolute property on a child, right, can be alter or can be alter according to the parent. But if it is fixed, it is fixed. So there are three important properties that you might see anywhere in D3JS graph. One is relative, one is absolute, and another is fixed. So I don't think fixed you will use, but if you're building a dashboard and you want to give an element, or maybe you want to have a footer, so that way you must be using some fixed property or absolute property. But most of the time you will see it's a relative. So relative meaning is you want to make sure your child element can like should be placed according to the parent element, so it should follow the parent instead of it following the body. So that's the three properties: relative, absolute, and fixed. Anybody has doubt in this? So you understand the difference between absolute, fixed, and relative?